They asked her for her boarding pass twice, in first class, where she'd already scanned it at the gate. Then they handed her a plastic bottle while everyone around her got crystal glasses. Then they tried to move her to economy. 46 minutes into the flight, the pilot collapsed. She was out of her seat before the echo of the scream finished. They stood in the aisle and told her to sit back down.
Touch our pilot.
Not her! Somebody stop her! Move.
She stepped over a seat armrest, walked through that cockpit door, saved his life, and landed the plane.
I'm an air marshal
Nobody
and a
had
Johns
stopped
Hopkins
to
trained
ask who she
emergency
was.
physician.
Have you ever had someone look at you and decide everything about you before you opened your mouth, before you did a single thing? Stay with me, because in 22 minutes, Rhiannon Caldwell would drop to her knees in that same aisle and scream, and the only person who could save her world would be the woman she just treated like she didn't belong in it. Zara Okonkwo touched the gold band on her left hand, turned it once, twice, felt the engraving worn smooth from years of this exact gesture. Steady, always. Her husband's words, Captain Troy Okonkwo, F-16 pilot, call sign Thunderhand, the most fearless man she'd ever known, and she'd known enough of them to have a real sample size. He talked too fast and laughed too loud and made her believe, within 10 minutes of meeting him, that the world was slightly less heavy than she'd been treating it. They were married 14 months after they met. He was dead 5 years later. T-38 Talon, mechanical failure, a training flight. He was 34 years old and he didn't eject in time. After Troy, Zara recalibrated. She'd spent 11 years as an F-22A Raptor pilot, stealth fighter, Mach 2, combat deployments over 2 countries, a Medal of Valor for pulling 14 people out of a burning helicopter in Kandahar with third-degree burns on both arms. She'd flown 2,847 hours. 1,340 of them were combat hours. Then she went to medical school, Johns Hopkins, emergency medicine, because she'd spent 11 years putting holes in things and she wanted to learn how to close them. She wore a plain black blouse and dark slacks. No uniform, no ribbons, nothing that told you a single thing about where she'd been. She opened her book, Advanced Aerodynamics and Flight Control Systems, 4th edition. She was on page 312. Rhiannon Caldwell had worked the Boston to DC route for 9 years. She knew the Platinum members by name, she remembered their drink orders, she laughed at their jokes even when they weren't funny, which was most of the time. For those passengers, she was exceptional. For others, she checked boarding passes twice. She served last. She gave plastic where everyone else got glass. She asked if someone bought the ticket for you, because the suggestion itself was the point, not the answer. In the past 5 years, 18 passengers had filed formal complaints against her. 12 were substantiated. She was still on this route. Because the system doesn't punish behavior, it quietly endorses. What Rhiannon didn't know was that her voice was being recorded, had been recording since the moment she'd asked for the boarding pass a second time. Zara's phone, face up on the tray table, time-stamped, continuous. Every word. Let me tell you who else was on this plane. Glenn Whitlock, Seat 3C, CEO of Whitlock Energy Solutions, $340 million, flew first class twice a week and had strong opinions about who deserved to. He had never once in his life been made to feel like he was in the wrong seat. Petra Vance, Seat 4A, real estate developer from Dallas. She had the kind of certainty that comes from spending your whole life inside a world that confirmed every assumption you walked in with. Admiral Garrett Moore, Seat 1A, retired, 71 years old, United States Navy. He had a faded cap and the specific kind of quiet that men have when they have seen enough of the world to know exactly what they're looking at. Rochelle Dessalines, the junior flight attendant, Haitian American, 6 years with the airline. She stood behind the galley curtain and saw everything Rhiannon did and hated herself for every second she stayed quiet. First Officer Nguyen Pham, up front in the cockpit. He was good at his job. He'd been in aviation for 8 years, He'd heard the call sign steady exactly once, in a story another pilot told him at a bar in Denver. He didn't know she was on his plane. The seatbelt sign chimed off. 35,000 feet, smooth air. The kind of morning flight where nothing happens and everyone arrives on time and nobody remembers it. Rhiannon emerged from the galley, pushing the chrome beverage cart. Her smile returned. Full wattage, completely convincing if you'd never seen what it cost her nothing to turn on. She worked the cabin from front to back. Admiral Moore in 1A. Coffee, black, please. She poured it into a ceramic cup, placed it on a cloth napkin, set it on his tray table with both hands. Row 1, seat B. Sparkling water in a proper glass, a wedge of lemon balanced on the rim. Row 2, she rolled right past it. No pause, no eye contact. The cart kept moving. Glenn Whitlock in 3C. Her whole posture changed, shoulders dropping, voice warming. Mr. Whitlock, pure honey. Macallan 18, we have it today. Glenn's face lit up. Now that's what I call service. She poured the scotch into a crystal tumbler, held it just briefly against the window light before handing it across. The kind of theater that turns a drink into a gesture. You're the best, Rhiannon. You really are. She laughed like it was the first time anyone had said that. Row 4, Petra Vance. Veuve Clicquot, ma'am? She poured the champagne on a gentle tilt, the foam rising to exactly the right level. Perfect, Petra said. Row 5. Row 6. Name after name. Glass after glass. Then Rhiannon made her way back up the aisle. She stopped at row 2. The pause lasted just long enough. Something to drink? The warmth had been wrung out of her voice like water from a cloth. Water, please, Zara said. Rhiannon reached under the cart. She came up with a small plastic bottle. The generic kind, no label. 16 ounces. The one they handed out in economy when a passenger asked and they didn't want to use a real glass. She set it on Zara's tray table without looking at her. No glass, no ice, no napkin. Everyone around Zara had glassware. In seat 1A, Admiral Moore looked at the plastic bottle. He looked at his ceramic cup. He said nothing, but the newspaper in his hands lowered slightly, and it didn't go back up. Behind the galley curtain, Rochelle stood with a coffee pot in both hands, staring at the floor. 40 minutes into the flight. Zara closed her book, slid it into the seat pocket, and unbuckled her belt. She stood. She took 2 steps toward the forward lavatory, the one immediately forward of first class, 3 feet from her seat, and Rhiannon materialized from the galley like she'd been waiting. Ma'am. Her body was positioned in the aisle like a human turnstile. The forward lavatory is reserved for platinum members. Zara looked at the lavatory door, looked at Rhiannon. I have a first-class ticket. First class and platinum are different tiers. Rhiannon's voice was steady, professional, and completely fabricated. There was no such policy. There had never been such a policy. The rear lavatories are available for standard first-class passengers. She said standard with the particular emphasis of someone who knows exactly what they're doing with a word. Glenn Whitlock turned in his seat to watch. Petra stopped pretending to look at her phone. Zara stood in the aisle for a moment. Still, the way she'd learned to be still in an F-22 cockpit at 30,000 feet with a threat on radar, no wasted movement, no performance, just the careful collection of information. She walked to the rear lavatories. Glenn exhaled a short laugh through his nose. He leaned across the armrest toward Petra's husband in the seat beside him. You see that? His voice wasn't lowered. He'd stopped bothering with that. This is what you get when standards don't mean anything anymore. He picked up his scotch. Whoever sold that woman a first-class ticket did the whole cabin a disservice. Petra's husband completely agree. Petra herself not looking up from her phone. And now she's going to complain about the lavatory policy. Watch, it'll be a whole thing. That's the playbook. Glenn swirled his tumbler. Create a scene, film it on your phone, put it online. These people have made a career out of it. He said, these people the way certain people say it, not as a description, but as a category. the kind that told you exactly what category they meant without making them say the word for it. Nobody in first class said anything. Rhiannon came back through the cabin, checking on passengers. She stopped at 3C, refilled Glenn's scotch, laughed at something he said, moved to 4A, asked Petra if she needed anything. She didn't stop at row 2. When Zara returned from the rear of the plane and sat back down, her tray table had been cleared. The plastic water bottle was gone. She hadn't finished it. Zara looked at the empty tray table. She reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and pressed the screen once without looking down. Still recording. The thing about prejudice, given an audience, is that it compounds. Glenn Whitlock had started the flight with smirks and implication, but something about the lavatory moment, Rhiannon's posture, the cabin's silence, the lack of any pushback, told him that the room was his. He adjusted his posture, faced forward, spoke at a volume that was technically a private conversation and practically a broadcast. You know what this airline needs to do? He wasn't talking to anyone in particular, which meant he was talking to everyone. Go back to a standard, any standard. When I started flying first class in '94, this meant something. You paid for quality. Quality of service, quality of experience, quality of the people sitting around you. He took a long sip. Now they'll put anybody up here. Petra set her champagne down. It's the rewards programs. Her voice carried the bright certainty of someone who believes they are making a polite observation. They let people accumulate points, and suddenly, someone who has no business sitting in first class is sitting in first class. It devalues the whole thing. Or the diversity initiatives, Glenn said. The word sat in the air like something dropped from a height. Half these tickets aren't purchased anymore. They're just given. He looked back at Zara. Zara was looking out the window. A man in row 5, a real estate attorney from Boston named Charles Merritt, who had said nothing for 45 minutes, leaned forward. She does look a little out of place, he offered, as though this were a fair and balanced observation. A little? Glenn said. He laughed. It was an ugly sound, short and flat. She sat down, and the whole cabin shifted. You all felt it. Don't tell me you didn't. Petra's husband. It's the entitlement that gets me. The attitude. Like she dares you to question it. Exactly. Glenn pointed his finger. That's it, exactly. These people have been trained to perform victimhood the second anyone notices what's right in front of them. He said these people again. Same category. No disguise on it now. Rhiannon emerged from the galley. She had heard everything. She was carrying a carafe of coffee, and she stopped at Glenn's row and refilled his cup, and he looked up at her with the conspiratorial warmth of a man who assumes everyone around him agrees with him. You're doing a great job with a difficult situation, he told her. Thank you, Mr. Whitlock. She let the smile stay on her face a beat too long. We do our best. She moved down the aisle. She did not stop at row 2. She went back into the galley and came out 30 seconds later. Walked directly to row 2. Her voice was pleasant and precise, and every syllable was a closed door. Ma'am, I'm going to need to ask you to move to an economy seat. The cabin went still. Not the polite quiet from before, a different kind of stillness, the kind that happens when something crosses from unpleasant into a different register entirely. Zara turned from the window. I'm sorry? We have a passenger in economy who has a medical condition. They require elevation. We need this seat. Rhiannon's face was completely composed. We'll have you relocated to a very comfortable seat in... Show me the documentation, Zara said. Rhiannon blinked. I'm sorry? The medical documentation. If you're relocating a first-class passenger against their will for a medical accommodation, you need written documentation of the condition, a signature from the captain authorizing the seat change, and you're required to offer compensation under federal passenger protection guidelines. She paused. I'll wait. The cabin was completely silent. Rhiannon's composure held. Barely. I can get the captain. Please do. Behind the galley curtain, Rochelle's hand was over her mouth. Rhiannon stood in the aisle for 3 seconds that felt like a full minute. Then she turned and walked back toward the galley. She didn't get the captain. She disappeared behind the curtain. Glenn Whitlock stared at the back of Zara's head. Who does she think she's talking to? His voice was flat now. The performance was gone, just contempt. Sitting up here in someone else's seat with her fake book, trying to act like she has rights. He shook his head slowly. This is what it is now. This right here. You let them in and they think they own the place. Nobody in first class said anything. Charles Merritt looked at his tray table. Petra took a sip of her champagne. Zara opened her book to page 312. From seat 1A, Admiral Garrett Moore folded his newspaper into his lap and stared straight ahead with the expression of a man who had spent a career choosing his moments. He wasn't done choosing yet. 46 minutes into the flight. In the cockpit, Captain Harold Brennan reached for his coffee cup. He took a sip, set it on the console, checked the altimeter. Then his chest came apart. That's the only way to describe it. A sudden, catastrophic pressure, like something had seized his sternum from the inside. His left arm went dead and useless in 1 second flat. His right hand spasmed on the yoke. The plane dipped 5 degrees. The nose fell away. In first class, every stomach dropped simultaneously. Glenn's scotch sloshed over the rim of his tumbler. Someone in the back of the plane made a sound. The overhead bins rattled. First Officer Win Pham snapped his head sideways. Captain? Brennan's mouth was open. His eyes were losing their focus, the way eyes do when the brain isn't getting what it needs. He was still there, barely, but his hands had stopped working, and the edges of his vision were going dark, in a way he recognized from every cardiologist description he'd heard and never fully believed applied to him. Captain Brennan! Pham grabbed the yoke, corrected the pitch, reached across and pressed his palm to Brennan's chest. The older man folded forward. Pham caught him, pushed him back against the headrest. He hit the radio. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. United 1921. Pilot incapacitated. Repeat. Pilot is incapacitated. Requesting emergency priority, Reagan National. He hit the flight attendant call button. 3 short bursts. The emergency code. In the galley, Rhiannon heard it. She had been trained for this. She had a laminated card with the steps on it. She'd rehearsed the protocol in recurrent training 7 times. All of it left her mind when she opened the cockpit door and saw Harold Brennan slumped against the window with his eyes half open and his color changing in real time from living to something that wasn't. Rhiannon Caldwell had worked this aircraft for 16 years. She screamed, high and pure and piercing, the way people scream when training has run out and what's left is animal terror. She stumbled backward through the cockpit door and into the forward galley, her back hitting the opposite wall, and she turned to face the first-class cabin with a face that had gone the color of old bone. Is anyone a doctor? Zara was out of seat 2A before the echo finished. She didn't run. She moved the way she moved in a trauma bay. Fast, deliberate, no wasted steps. Her right hand was already in her bag, pulling out her medical ID. Her eyes went immediately to the cockpit door, and she calculated the path. Rhiannon's eyes found her. And even now, even with the pilot dying 12 feet away, even with the weight of that reality pressing down on every person in the cabin, the reflex fired before the thinking could stop it. Not you. Her voice cracked on the edges. Sit down. I need a real. I'm a physician. Zara kept moving. Emergency medicine. I need someone who is actually Johns Hopkins trained. Let me through. Glenn Whitlock surged out of 3C. He was a big man. 6 feet, solid. The build of someone who played football in college 30 years ago and keeps the frame even when the conditioning leaves. He planted himself in the aisle like he'd been waiting for an excuse to do this exact thing. Both palms out, feet spread. Lady. His voice was the voice he used to close deals and silence rooms. Sit back down, you're making this worse. Zara stopped 2 feet in front of him. She looked at him the way she had once looked at airspace. Not as an obstacle, but as a problem with a solution she was already running the calculations on. "The pilot is in cardiac arrest," she said. "You have approximately 4 minutes before the damage becomes permanent. I'm going through that door. You're not going anywhere near that cockpit. Then you will watch a man die so you can feel like you did something." Glenn didn't move. Zara took a step to the right. Glenn shifted right. She took a step left. He shifted left. Charles Merritt from row 5 had stood up. "Call the airline! She's trying to get into the cockpit." Petra's voice from across the aisle. "Someone stop her. She's lying about being a doctor." The cabin was erupting now. Voices stacking on top of each other. People half standing, pointing. Rhiannon was behind Zara, tugging at her arm. "Please, ma'am, please just—" Zara turned and looked at Rhiannon. 1 full second. Quiet and direct and completely clear. "Let go of me." Rhiannon let go. Zara turned back to Glenn. She looked at the seat beside him. 3D, unoccupied, armrest in the folded position. She stepped sideways onto the seat, 1 foot, stepped across the armrest, and was through before Glenn processed what had happened. He grabbed for her arm, got air. She was already at the cockpit door. "Hey!" From seat 1A, Garrett Moore stood. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. "Sit down." 2 words. The weight of 32 years of naval command behind them. Glenn turned. Moore looked at him with the exact expression of a man who has faced things Glenn Whitlock could not conceive of and finds this particular display unimpressive. "Sit down." Glenn sat. Zara pushed the cockpit door open and went through. Pham spun in his seat. He saw a woman in civilian clothes. No uniform, no insignia, a medical ID card in her extended hand. His hand moved toward the alert panel. Zara saw the movement and spoke before he pressed anything. "Medical ID. I'm a physician. How long has he been down?" The professionalism in her voice was a specific kind, clipped, certain, the tone of someone who has been in rooms where hesitation has a body count. Pham's hand paused on the panel. "Maybe 4 minutes." Sudden onset, grabbed his chest, went non-responsive. She was already at Brennan's side, 2 fingers to his neck, the other hand on his wrist. She read his face, his color, the muscle tone in his jaw. Pulse is there, weak and irregular. She was still moving, pulling the AED from its overhead mount by memory. She'd located it when she came through the door. "Get me his medical history if you have it." "I don't have." "Then hold him steady." She had the pads on in 15 seconds. The machine cycled. "Shock advised." "Clear." She pressed the button. Brennan's chest jumped. The machine cycled again. "No shock advised. Begin CPR." She began. 30 compressions, measured, controlled. Her arms didn't shake. This was not the first time she'd done this, and the body remembers what the mind has been trained to produce under pressure. Pham watched her hands, and something in the back of his mind started to form a question. Rochelle appeared in the doorway with the portable oxygen tank. Zara reached back without looking, found it, placed the mask, adjusted the flow. The AED cycled. Shock advised. Clear. Second shock. This time, Brennan stirred. Not conscious, not close to it, but the pulse changed character. Less chaotic, more like something trying to find its rhythm. "He's stabilizing," Zara said. She sat back, kept her fingers on his pulse, watching his color. "He's going to need the catheter lab as soon as we land. What's our approach status?" Pham was already back on the radio. "Reagan has emergency priority, runway 29, fire and medical standing by." He paused. "But I need to handle the approach with 1 pilot. I've never—" He stopped. Zara had stepped over the center console and was looking at the instrument panel. Not casually, not the way a passenger looks at things they don't understand. She was reading it, the altimeter, the heading indicator, the approach plate on the right MFD, with the particular speed of someone whose brain processes avionics the way other people read street signs. She reached out and corrected the autopilot heading by 2 degrees. A small adjustment, precise. Pham stared at her hand. Then he looked at her face. "What's your flight background?" His voice had changed. She looked at the approach plate, calculated the distance remaining. F-22A, 11 years, 2,847 hours. Pham went very still. "What was your call sign?" She looked at him directly, for the first time since she'd come through the door. "Steady." Pham closed his eyes for 1 second. Then he opened them. "I heard the Kandahar story," he said, "at a bar in Denver. The helicopter." Later, she was already settling into the left seat. Her hands found the yoke. Different from anything she'd flown, wider, slower, a completely different weight. But the fundamentals don't change. Lift, drag, thrust, weight. A runway is a runway. Physics is physics. Right now, I need your approach configuration, and I need you to trust me. Pham looked at the instrument panel, looked at Brennan, looked at the woman in the left seat who had arrived from economy and saved the pilot's life and was now sitting in his captain's chair like she'd been there before. "Yes, ma'am," he said. He'd never called a civilian ma'am in a cockpit. He meant it completely. They didn't speak much on the approach. Pham called the items. Zara responded. They moved through the emergency descent checklist with the rhythm of people who understand that efficiency is a form of care. Every word counted, nothing wasted. Reagan approach cleared them direct to runway 29. The other aircraft in the sequence were already being redistributed. The frequency was theirs. Zara brought the 737 down on the profile. She felt the aircraft differently from anything she'd flown. Wider, slower, with a different weight distribution and avionics she'd never touched. But she'd been taught by a man who believed that machines speak to people willing to listen. She listened. She asked the aircraft where it wanted to go, and she helped it get there. "Gear down," she said. The landing gear deployed with a solid thunk. "Flaps to 30. The aircraft pitched slightly, and she corrected before Pham registered the need. Approaching minimums. The runway came up to meet them. The threshold markings grew from abstract to real to immediate. She flared at the exact right moment, not the anxious early flare of someone compensating for uncertainty, but the precise, practiced flare of someone who has done this in aircraft moving 3 times faster under conditions 3 times worse. The main gear touched the runway. A chirp, clean, centered. Thrust reversers, braking. The aircraft decelerated through the landing roll in a clean, controlled arc. They stopped. Centerline, complete. In first class, nobody moved for 3 seconds. Then the cabin broke. Somebody clapped. Then somebody else. Then the whole aircraft was applauding, the sound building from the front and rolling backward through every seat. Zara sat with her hands resting on the controls until the tower confirmed they were parked. She turned her left hand over and looked at the gold ring. She pressed her thumb to the inside of the band, felt the engraving. Steady, always. She exhaled. "Good aircraft," she said quietly. Pham, who had been watching her face during the rollout, looked away. He didn't trust himself to speak. Paramedics boarded in 3 minutes. Brennan was on a stretcher in 5. He was conscious by the time they reached the door, barely, eyes open and tracking, hand squeezing the paramedic's arm in the way of someone who can't form words yet, but knows they're still present. The passengers filed off in silence. Glenn Whitlock walked with his eyes fixed somewhere ahead of his feet. His scotch had been left on the seat, half finished, the crystal tumbler empty of all that confidence it used to hold. Petra Vance didn't look at anyone. Charles Merritt from Boston moved quickly and didn't make eye contact. They walked off the jet bridge into the terminal, and every one of them spent the following 90 seconds standing near the gate doing the private arithmetic of what they'd said and who'd been listening. Rhiannon stood at the galley entrance in her uniform, hands at her sides. Harriet Lang came through the jetway door at a pace that communicated she'd been in motion since before the aircraft landed. Vice President of Operations, Northeastern Corridor, 54 years old, charcoal suit, the demeanor of someone who has handled every category of aviation crisis and approaches them all with the same cool, forward-moving competence. She walked past the gate agents without stopping, into the jetway, past the cockpit, into the first-class galley. She looked at Rhiannon. She looked at Zara, who was leaning against the galley counter with her bag at her feet and her medical credentials on the counter in front of her, waiting with no particular urgency. Lang took in the credentials, the medical ID, the military ID beside it. She looked at Zara for a long moment. Then she turned to the gate agent behind her. "Get me Whitlock and Vance, right now, both of them, before they leave this terminal." The gate agent moved. Lang stepped into the center of the galley. "Ms. Caldwell." Rhiannon straightened. "Ms. Lang, don't." Lang held up one hand. "Before you say a single word, I want you to understand something." She held up her phone. The screen was playing audio. Rhiannon's voice came through the speaker, clear and time-stamped. Probably a corporate diversity ticket. You know how it is now. Quotas and all that. Rhiannon's face went white. 1 hour and 22 minutes, Lang said. Continuous recording, every word you said, every word you didn't say. She let the audio run for another few seconds. Glenn's voice now, "These people have been trained to perform victimhood," then stopped it. "I did not," Rhiannon started. "You told a Johns Hopkins trained emergency medicine physician to sit down while the pilot was dying." Lang's voice didn't go higher, it went quieter. Which was worse? You told her to sit down. I didn't know who she was. That is exactly the problem. Lang looked at her steadily. You made a decision about who she was before she ever spoke a word, and that decision almost killed every person on this aircraft. Rhiannon opened her mouth, then closed it. You have 18 formal complaints in 5 years. Lang set the phone on the counter. 12 substantiated. The airline has paid 6 private settlements. We have protected you at every stage of that record. Today is the last day that protection exists." She paused. "Your employment with this airline is terminated effective this moment." Rhiannon's composure held for about 4 seconds. "I have 16 years. "You had 16 years, Lang said. "They ended when you stood in that aisle." The gate agent reappeared in the jetway doorway. "Ms. Lang, I have Mr. Whitlock and Ms. Vance." Glenn and Petra were escorted into the galley. Glenn still had the remnants of his certainty, the posture, the jaw, but it was the kind of certainty that shrinks fast when the room changes. He looked at Zara, then at Lang. "I'm not sure what this is about," he started, "but I'll have you know, I've been a platinum member of this airline for—" Lang played the audio. Glenn's own voice came out of the phone speaker. "These people have been trained to perform victimhood the second anyone notices what's right in front of them." The galley was very quiet. Then Lang played the next clip. "You let them in and they think they own the place." Glenn's jaw worked. "That was a private. It was recorded on a commercial aircraft during a federal emergency," Lang said. "Your platinum membership is revoked. You are banned from this airline permanently. If you'd like to challenge that, you're welcome to contact our legal team." She turned to Petra. Petra's champagne color had left her completely. Lang played a third clip. Petra's voice. "It devalues the whole thing. Then, she's lying. She just wants to get into the cockpit." "A pilot was in cardiac arrest," Lang said. "You tried to stop the physician from reaching him." Petra said nothing. "Same status as Mr. Whitlock," Lang said. "Permanently banned." She turned to Rochelle, who was standing against the wall of the galley with both hands folded and a face that had stopped trying to hide what it felt. "Ms. Dessalines." Lang looked at her directly. "You should have spoken sooner, you know that." Rochelle nodded. "But you got into that cockpit. You brought the oxygen. You stayed." Lang paused. "Lead flight attendant. This route. Effective today." Rochelle pressed her lips together, nodded again without speaking. Lang turned last to Zara. She looked at her for a long moment. The medical credentials, the military ID, the plane bag, the gold ring on her left hand. And something shifted in her composure. Not unprofessional, just human. "Captain," she said, "this airline owes you more than I'm able to say right now. I want to formally offer. I don't want anything from you." Zara's voice was even and certain. "But I want you to reopen every complaint against her. Find those passengers. Apologize to them publicly. No NDAs. No quiet settlement that requires their silence. Done. And I want you to look at your training program, not the 4-hour click-through module. Actually look at it, because what happened on this aircraft didn't come from one person. It came from a culture that decided certain passengers were worth more than others. That needs to change at the structure, not the surface." Lang held her gaze. "Done," she said again. Zara picked up her bag, picked up her book, picked up her credentials, and slid them back into the side pocket. She walked out through the jetway. She had a conference to get to. The story didn't walk out of that terminal, it ran. Passengers had filmed from the moment Rhiannon screamed. Phones had captured Glenn in the aisle, arms spread, blocking Zara's path. Someone in row 6 had filmed Zara stepping over the seat armrest. Someone else had captured the landing through the window, the angle of approach, the flare, the clean centerline touchdown. The audio recording Zara had submitted to Lang was shared by Lang's own office as part of the airline's public accountability statement 48 hours later. They didn't have to, they chose to. By that evening, it had 11 million views. By the following morning, it had 30. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, every network ran the story. Call sign steady, F-22 pilot, combat veteran, Medal of Valor, Johns Hopkins MD, landed a plane she'd never flown, saved a pilot she'd never met, in a seat she'd been questioned about deserving. Glenn Whitlock's company issued a statement the next day. It used the words, "do not reflect," and "deeply committed in close proximity." It was the kind of statement that is written when the only alternative is worse. 2 board members called for his resignation publicly. He submitted it 19 days later, citing a desire to pursue other interests. He stopped flying commercially. Petra Vance's real estate firm lost 5 institutional clients in 11 days. The crisis PR firm she hired told her there wasn't much they could do when the audio existed. Charles Merritt from Boston was named in several news articles. He issued a personal apology that was not widely accepted. The airline reopened all 18 complaints on record against Rhiannon Caldwell. They contacted every passenger individually. The apologies were public, the compensation was real, no NDAs. 41 additional staff members were reassigned or terminated as the internal audit expanded through the following 6 weeks. Rochelle Dessalines now leads the airline's Passenger Experience Accountability Program. She designed the training curriculum herself. She keeps the memo confirming her promotion framed in her kitchen. Captain Harold Brennan spent 12 days in the hospital following cardiac surgery. He recovered fully. He testified before the Senate Commerce Committee about aviation safety protocols and passenger discrimination. He did not editorialize. He described what he had allowed to happen on his aircraft over 6 years and called it by its right name. He requested Zara as a guest instructor at the airline's training academy. She agreed. First Officer Nguyen Pham requested a mentorship session. He told her on the second meeting that he'd kept the Kandahar citation in his flight bag since he'd first heard the story. She told him it was Troy's citation more than hers. He didn't ask her to explain. He understood. 3 months later, Joint Base Andrews, October morning. Cold, clear, the kind of sky that looks like it was rinsed overnight and left to dry in full light. Zara stood at attention in her dress uniform. She hadn't worn it in 2 years, and the weight of it felt different now, familiar the way things feel when you've been away from them long enough to remember why they mattered. Ribbons across her left chest, more of them than most people in the crowd could identify by name. Today they added 2 more, one for Kandahar, whose citation had spent 3 years moving through administrative channels, one for Flight 1921. The applause when she walked to the podium was the kind that starts in one place and fills a space completely until you feel it in your chest and not just your ears. She stood at the microphone and let it run. She was in no hurry. When the crowd settled, she looked out at them. "I'm not here to talk about myself." Her voice was quiet, and it carried the way certain voices do, not because of volume, but because of weight. "I want to tell you what actually happened on that plane." She paused. "The people in first class that morning saw a black woman in a seat and made a decision before I opened my mouth, before I said a single word, before I did anything at all. They decided I didn't belong." Another pause. That decision, that specific, particular decision, almost killed 197 people. Not because I failed them, because they were so committed to it that even with a man dying in the cockpit, they stood in the aisle and told me to sit back down. She looked down at her left hand. "Turned the ring. My husband, Captain Troy Okonkwo, used to say that fear is a choice." She let the words settle. What he said it, like he'd worked it through the math and arrived at it as a fact rather than a comfort. I believed him. I still do. What? She looked back out at the crowd. "What he also said, and this is what I want you to carry out of here today, is that dignity isn't something anyone can give you or take from you. It's something you give yourself, every single day, before anyone else has the chance to tell you what they think you're worth." Her voice didn't waver. "To every person watching this who has been questioned about a seat you paid for, a room you earned, a space you belong in, I want you to hear this clearly." She straightened. "One day, they will need you. They won't see it coming. They won't be ready for it. And when that moment comes, you will have a choice." The crowd leaned forward. "Stay steady." She stepped back from the microphone. The applause rose until it filled every corner of the parade ground and kept going. Zara stood at attention and let it run. Then she adjusted her cover, picked up her cover from the podium, and walked off the parade ground the same way she had walked into every piece of airspace she had ever been told she didn't belong in. Straight, head up, steady, always.